Okay, glad that everybody has joined in today. Thank you for tuning into our Sunday night lesson. As I told you a couple of weeks ago, we're saving Proverbs chapter 4 for tonight. Pretty short study. We shouldn't take up maybe about 15, 18 minutes of your time tonight, but I hope it'll be beneficial to you. Of course, happy Father's Day to all our fathers out there. Remember that every gentleman in the Lord's church, especially here at Bowden, and just in the church in general, we all play an important role in every area of the life of our children. And we have to work together to make sure that we are raising them right. It takes a village. I've said this many times. I want to know who's in the village. I'm thankful that all of you are. Proverbs chapter 4, let me share my Bible, and we'll go ahead and get started in Proverbs chapter 4. Proverbs chapter 4 is a real simple, we're going to look at these first 9 verses, real simple passage, easy to understand, easy to digest and go through, but just some beautiful, beautiful sections on the relationship of Solomon to his father David, and then, of course, Solomon passing this wisdom on to his son in Proverbs chapter 4. Now, if you'll remember, all throughout these first 9 chapters, Solomon is passing wisdom down to his son. It's a collection of his discourses, and he's telling him he needs to be wise time and time again to use wisdom, how to utilize wisdom with his senses, with his choices, with his friendships. Every area of life is dedicated to wisdom. And so in Proverbs chapter 4, it's no different. Verse 1, hear, O sons, a father's instruction, and be attentive that you may gain insight. For I give you good precepts, do not forsake my teaching. When I was a son with my father, tender, the only one in the side of my mother, he taught me and said to me, let your heart hold fast my words, keep my commandments and live. Get wisdom, get insight, do not forget, and do not turn away from the words of my mouth. Do not forsake her, she will keep you. Love her, she will guard you. The beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom, and whatever you get insight. Prize her highly, and she will exalt you. She will honor you if you embrace her. She will put on your head a graceful garland. She will bestow upon you a beautiful crown. Wisdom depicted here as the memories, it seems, that Solomon has of his father's instruction here at the very beginning of this chapter, Proverbs chapter 4. Let's talk a little bit about the instruction of a father for some time, and then the lesson will be yours. As I said, this passage is straight to the point, and Solomon gets right into it in Proverbs chapter 4, beginning in verse 1. Of course, he gives kind of this introduction here in the first 2 verses. This is just kind of a call to action for whoever's reading. Be attentive, give insight to what I'm about to say. I'm going to give you good precepts. Don't forsake my teaching. This is a very generic statement that's made all throughout the book of Proverbs. No exception here in Proverbs chapter 4. But it begins in verse 3, and he says this: when I was a son with my father, tender, the only one in the side of my mother, notice these next 3 words, he taught me and said to me. Those next few words there, that statement, he taught me and said to me. Understand, when we talk about the relationship of a son to a father, or a relationship of a mentor to a mentee, what we need to understand is that there is a responsibility to teach in the home, in the family, in that nuclear unit of the father to the children. And that's exactly what happens here in Proverbs chapter 4. Now, if you would turn your attention, this is probably a verse that many of you are familiar with, but if you go to Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 4, you have kind of a similar statement from Paul in the New Testament, where he talks about the responsibility of a father to teach. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. The responsibility of a father is to bring up his children in the discipline and the instruction. It's the old King James you may be most familiar with. Bring them up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. It's the job of the father to bring up his children in the life that a Christian should live. It is his responsibility to bring them up in the way they should serve God, to bring them up in the instruction and in the discipline, in the nurture and admonition of God. Now, notice that the command to teach is not given to any other group besides the parent and the father specifically. The job to teach children and to bring up children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord is not given to the church. It's not given to schools. It's not even given to the elders. Now, the elders do that. They teach, they instruct. Churches, we should as a whole teach and instruct, and even schools are very good places for kids to learn, and they can serve as aids, but they should never be the crutches upon which we base our child's spiritual knowledge. They cannot be adequate to teach the amount of time that is needed to give a child for them to learn the truth of God. I'm reminded of Deuteronomy chapter 6. These, again, are probably very familiar passages to you, but in Deuteronomy chapter 6, these words I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently, down here through verse 9, to your children. Talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise up. Bind them as a sign on your hand, as frontlets between your eyes. You write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. In other words, the law of God in the home should be everywhere. It should be taught in the morning, in the evening, in the afternoon. It should be taught at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It should be taught at every occasion, every opportunity. And that main responsibility falls on the shoulders of the father. It is God's word that should permeate the household, something that the church and the school, it just can't provide alone. They can be aids, but it is a blessing to have a child that is taught by a father. And so Proverbs chapter 4 and verse 3. When I was a son with my father, tender, the only one in the sight of my mother, he taught me and said to me. Notice that it takes actual action to teach. We can't just assume that someone is going to learn by osmosis, that they're going to learn by, just the ability for them maybe to soak up what's going on around them. We have to be intentional. He said, he taught me, he said to me. What a beautiful set of words. When fathers fail to fulfill this responsibility, the Bible tells me they're going to be held accountable. I'm reminded of 1 Samuel chapter 2, when Eli, his sons, were going against God's law. He tried to correct them. That was his responsibility, but he failed. He didn't have the power to restrain them, 1 Samuel chapter 3. The responsibility, when a father fails to take that charge, then has to be picked up by other people. Remember Timothy, he was blessed to have a godly grandmother and mother. But what should have also been mentioned there in 1 Timothy chapter 1, or 2 Timothy, let me just show you that passage. 2 Timothy chapter 1 and verse 5. Paul says this about Timothy. I am reminded of your sincere faith, a faith that dwelt first in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and now I'm sure dwells in you. You know what should have also been in verse 5 of 2 Timothy chapter 1? A faith that dwelt first in your grandmother Lois, your mother Eunice, and your father, fill in the blank, and now I'm sure dwells in you as well. When a father fails to take up the responsibility to train children and bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord with the help and the care of a home that works together and a wife and a support system around him, when he fails to take charge, he needs to take responsibility. I'm not saying he's the only one to teach. What I'm saying is it's his responsibility. When he fails to do that, other people have to pick up the slack behind him. 1 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 15. Just go down a couple of chapters here. 2 Timothy 3:15. It was apparent that Timothy had learned the sacred writings, the scriptures from childhood, which are able to make you wise for salvation through faith in Christ Jesus. Verse 15. He had been taught that from childhood, but it wasn't his father that taught him. It was his grandmother and his mother. And God bless good women who do that. But listen, today's not Mother's Day, it's Father's Day. And it is the responsibility of men to train up young people and bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, especially a father. And so Solomon says here in Proverbs 4, I was taught by my father. One of the greatest gifts a father can give a child is the training that they need in God. He also says here in this passage, Proverbs chapter 4, let's see here, Proverbs chapter 4. He also says here, he was taught when he was tender. There are tons of studies out there psychologically within, the field of psychology, human and child development, especially within the realm of human and child development and human sexuality. When you talk about the training of a child, it's like before they're age 5, they learn how to communicate. They learn how to deal with problems and solve problems. They learn how to interact in society and in public, and they learn how to treat people that they love and neighbors and enemies and friends. And by the time they're 5, they've learned almost everything they need to learn about the structure of their world. Now, they're going to fill in the gaps through their whole life, but they learn the base of their discipline and their personality and their ability to deal with things by age 5. That should be sobering to us as parents, that by age 5, we have given the studs on the house of our child's future that hold them up and will develop them into who they need to be. He said the teaching occurred when he was young, when he was impressionable, when his father had a lot to say. We all know that children, as they're young, they listen very intently, and they want to do everything mommy and daddy does, and they want to follow after dad and copy everything he does while they're young. We need to take advantage of that passion they have and teach them, because when they grow older, they may lose that passion. They may lose that want and desire to be just like daddy. We need to be willing to do what the Father says. And part of that is teaching when they are tender. There, that passage, tender, the only one in the sight of my mother. David took that responsibility to Solomon serious. He taught him, he said, let your heart hold fast my words, keep my commandments, get wisdom. We're going to get into all that in just a moment. But when he was young, he took the opportunity. Now, it's never too late to teach somebody. It's just sometimes more difficult as they get older. You have to put in more time, and they don't listen as well, and they don't have as many questions, and they're not as curious. When a child is more likely to disregard what mom and dad say is later in life. So we've got to get that information in soon, but never is there a time when it's too late. Never while children are alive and well and under your home, or even a little bit beyond your home. You can still teach them. It becomes more difficult. They listen less. They develop their own personalities and ideologies about the world, but we never have run out of time. And so the teaching, it has to begin early, long before they're in school with other children, long before peer pressure and poor behavior encourage them to disobey, long before teachers will encourage them to reject their parents. We need to teach them to follow the law of God. He said, I was taught when I was tender. What a beautiful encouragement to parents. I was taught when I was tender. There are plenty of other things that he mentions here about his teaching, but I want to notice a couple of things that he was taught. He was taught, hold fast the words, keep my commandments, and live. Notice verse 5. Get wisdom, get insight. Don't forsake wisdom. She will keep you and love you. You love her and she will guard you. Get wisdom, get insight. Prize her. She will exalt you. She will honor you if you embrace her. She will place on your head a graceful garland, a beautiful crown. You will be victorious if you hold on to wisdom. Notice that Solomon was taught by his father the things that are important, the things that are valuable, wisdom that is valuable. To make wisdom the principal thing in their life, he says, get wisdom, get understanding. Wisdom is the principal thing that we should seek after, and we have to train our children to seek after it as well, to run after wisdom and try to find it. They need to love and exalt and embrace wisdom. He says, love her and she will keep you, exalt her and she will lift you up. She's going to honor you when you embrace her. They need to be taught to exalt wisdom, to make wise decisions. Many people regret a lot of decisions they make when they're younger, and I don't know if we can avoid all of that, but we can train our children to avoid most of it, to not regret the decisions they've made, because we've taught them to exalt and embrace and run after wisdom with all of their heart. He tells his son to embrace the benefits. Notice what he says about the benefits. He says that if you prize her highly, she will exalt you. She will embrace you. She will make you victorious. The benefits of wisdom are so great. She's going to preserve you, some translations say in verse 6. She's going to place a graceful ornament over your head, verse 9. Or as our translation says, she will put a graceful garland over your head, a beautiful crown. We need to teach our children that there are benefits to being wise and being intelligent and smart and making the right decisions, and being careful who they marry and being careful who they spend time with. That's what Proverbs chapter 4 teaches. Fathers, we need to stress those important things. But so often we get tied and sucked into the world of stressing that which is trivial. We spend so much time with our children on things that are not important, the trivial matters, and then we neglect the things that are important. There are so many things we can teach our children, skills, things they can do with their life, ways that they can get ahead in life. And all of those things are important, but they're not more important than God. God is the chief thing we should be teaching our children and our friends and our loved ones. And all of us should encourage our children as a whole in the church to push away temptation, to not just want a high-paying job and a good degree. Those things are good and they can be used to glorify God, but We need to take them and teach them that they need to put every pursuit in life in the context of bringing glory and honor to the Lord. You know, many children have been destroyed because they have sought after the world, because that's what they've seen. Their entire life, from cradle to out of the house, they saw families search after the world. And they thought that was what they should go after. But that's not what was taught to Solomon. He was taught to prize wisdom highly, to go after her and not forsake her, to love her. And if he did that, he understood there would be great benefit. So we need to be teaching our children. That is the responsibility of fathers. And what a beautiful responsibility that is. What a great honor for God to trust us enough to put us in that position. We need to take that responsibility seriously. Let's not fail to fulfill that charge. We need to teach our children. We need to teach them when they're young, when we have them within our hands and they're moldable. We need to teach them to follow after the Lord. We also need to teach our children to follow after those things that are important, that are so valuable, and not to search after the trivial things of life, but to go after wisdom, to, in their tender age, say to them, say it audibly and teach them. Don't just expect them to understand it by osmosis. Tell them, you need to hold fast to these things. Get wisdom. Go after it. Get insight. Wisdom will help you. She will exalt you and embrace you and make you victorious in life. She'll make you successful in life as a Christian, because everything you do is put in the context of glorifying God. As I said, this was a short section. We could have gone into maybe some more detail at places, but I just wanted to give you that short encouragement tonight to seek after wisdom and to try to find her. And we need to pass that on to generation after generation. I'll give you one final passage. I didn't mean to cancel the share there right away. Let me give you one final passage here in Titus chapter 2. Titus chapter 2. As for you, teach what accords to sound doctrine. Older men are to teach the younger men self-control, dignity, sound in the faith and love. Older women, be reverent in behavior, be an example, self-controlled. They need to teach the young women to love their husbands and their children, to do all these things so that God is glorified. We need to be teaching these things to younger generations. Thank you so much for your attention. I appreciate you joining in with us tonight, and I hope Proverbs chapter 4 was encouraging to you.